Good evening tonight, folks. This is your man Donald King. How y'all feeling tonight? You good? Let me scroll the screen over a bit so I can check to see if any comments pour in. I hope everybody out there is doing well. I am doing lovely. Maybe no, lovely is a bit of a stretch. But I've seen this meme in circulation for the last couple days, and people, it's not just the meme, it's the accompanying text, wherein people are going after this Universe 25 experiment. I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but it's an experiment conducted on mice by researcher, I think his name was John Calhoun, if I'm not mistaken, and it was called, John B. Calhoun, and it was... I guess the overall name given to the experiment was the behavioral sink. Okay? And what the behavioral sink essentially sought to describe is what he referred to in his work as the first death, that occurred when the mice had lost all sense of purpose for living, and as such, social bonds within the little community that was constructed broke down, and ultimately these new emergent personality types, they came in and they sort of overtook this system of mice wherein you had bruisers and you had beautiful mice and you had hyper masculine, hyper aggressive females, and ultimately the males and the females, they lost any sort of ability to or interest in copulating, thereby leading to the extinction of the colony. Now, the reason why this is important is because people keep trying to draw comparisons between what's happening in society now and what happened in this experiment. As a matter of fact, when this experiment was conducted, through the first 25 iterations first 24 iterations of the experiment, Professor Calhoun, or I don't know if he was a professor, but researcher, he garnered enough attention with his work that the NIH came in and they gave him some land in, I think it was one of the coastal, I think it might have been North or South Carolina or something like that. I'll recall it. But basically what they did was they gave him room to create this big mouse utopia, right? And it was very similar to what you read about in the book of Genesis with, the Adam and Eve archetypes. So basically what ended up happening was this dude, he created basically a little rat garden of Eden. And in this mice garden of Eden, he made sure that there was plenty of food, there was plenty of space for these mice to run around and be fruitful, become many, and fill the colony, right? Unlimited food supply, unlimited access to water, etc., etc. Now, there are a couple of caveats to this. There are a couple of things to take into consideration. One, this is all filtered information, so the degree to which what I've learned is reliable, it can be anywhere from 30 to 90%. So I don't know how much of this was actually divulged or what the findings were, apart from what was reported from what I saw, but it's consistent with what I understand to be correct through the Avatar perspective. So I'm going to run with what I read. And something else to note is that in this colony, the reason why it doesn't necessarily perfectly correlate to humanity is because there is no outside influence. There was no outside influence. In order for this to be an impartial experiment, they had to have limited interaction with these mice in order to get a scientific finding that was a fair, that could be fairly analyzed. There had to be impartiality. Therefore, that means they had to sort of sit back. And we live in society, and society is run by, ironically, individuals and groups that sort of fit this mouse utopia framing, and I'll explain that as I move forward. So there was no, so far as I'm aware, there was no parasitic interest involved that was sort of leeching off of the mice for or better yet, in efforts to live and benefit at their expense. And because there was no sort of external authority monitoring and influencing what was happening, then it doesn't necessarily correlate to what's happening in the society, but it most of it still flies. So that said, let's sort of get into it. Now, this meme, I think it was circulated by someone who has far right leanings, because they sort of displaced some objects in there, and it seems like they were trying to sort of vilify feminism and homosexuality through the meme as it was put out, right? So they likened the beautiful mice in the meme. They were only talking about the beautiful mice being male, when in fact there were male and female beautiful mice. And beautiful mice are the ones who sort of withdrew from the colonies and only spent their time taking care of themselves. They didn't have any battle scars from fighting, and their coats were cleaner. They would be like the upper crust of society. They would be like, the global elites, the people who don't have to suffer through labor, or who aren't necessarily exposed to the rest of the hive. They are ideologically divided from the rest of the group. But then, you have the aggressive females and the hypermasculine females, and, they would turn on their children. They would kill their children, and they, stopped wanting to interact with the men. The men, without a reason to defend their food or hunt for food, became weak and docile. And then there came about some bruiser mice that basically intimidated the weaker mice and had them in a constant state of shookness. All right. Yeah, man. It's like, and a lot of that does seem like what happens in society. We have a lot of a weaker breed of men that have come along that, they're softer. They're not as, and mostly because it's like we don't have to do manual labor anymore. We don't have to do a lot of things. I guess as a result, there's like of society progressing to what it has, and technology overtaking so many roles and things just becoming easier in general. It's like there's a softer breed of man now than there was in previous years. And, I guess the only thing that you could liken to being the hypermasculine aggressor male would be the bully. The bully, the bruiser, the fighter, who in itself is not necessarily powerful. It's good at violence. You understand what I'm saying? Some are big, some are not, but long story short, I'm going to get to the points that I want to make because there's a lot to describe in this, and I'm going to post a link to the video that I watched that described the breakdown of this mouse universe. I went and researched it independent of what was said in the meme because I understood that there was some sort of ideological bent in the meme, like someone was trying to create a narrative that wasn't necessarily supported by information that could be gleaned from the experiment itself. But the beautiful mice, it wasn't just men, it was men and women. So it's like trying to correlate that to gay males and homosexual men, it doesn't fly over, right? And then also, women having to become more territorial, more aggressive. That doesn't necessarily correlate to the feminism movement or any of those other things. Like, again, there's so much to unpack here that I'm just going to post the link to the video and you can check it out. It's only like 7 or 8 minutes and he gives a pretty accurate synopsis of what I gleaned from the experiment. So I'll probably defer to his work to sort of help you and help inform you of what was going on. But let's get to the point of this podcast, right? The point of the podcast is, what did I say? What actually happened in Universe 25 and what the experiment ultimately proved, and what happened to cause a societal collapse in this now famed experiment, and how does it apply to humanity? Okay, so let's get into this. Universe 25, what did it ultimately prove? I'm skipping straight to Avatar shit on this. When something becomes fundamentally divorced from reality, it becomes psychotic. Look at these mice. They were hand-selected for breeding from an institution. Okay, these were basically engineered mice. They were genetically, they were selected because of their sort of genetic superiority. Again, very much like Adam and Eve, right? They were pretty much transmuted. They were engineered. Now, the reason why I mention this is because these mice, they were not part of a natural system. They were not synced up in reality. Every life form that you see out in nature, and we're not talking about domesticated life forms or life forms that have been transmuted by humans so as to become pets. We're talking about real natural life forms out in the world around you. They are building blocks that belong to systems. Okay? When you take something and isolate it from a system, it's like, imagine cutting the tip of your finger off and putting it in a jar, a small jar that didn't have enough oxygen in it so that the skin could dry out or the flesh could dry out. Well, what happened? It would rot. It would rot. Corruption is modal. It's modal. What happened to these mice is kind of what is happening to humanity, or can happen to humanity, but will ultimately happen to all things that run on corruption and or that are affected by corruption. What this experiment failed to factor in was the presenter, was the person who actually conducted the experiment. They never factored themselves into the information they were collecting. And I'm going to get to why that's important here in just a second. But here you've created this space where these mice don't just live without a sense of purpose. They live fundamentally disconnected from reality, fundamentally disconnected from any natural habitat, natural system. And what did they do? They formed cliques. They start turning on each other. They became tribal. They lost all ability to bond. And as units that effectively merged together to form a structural building block, they broke down. Don't think about the mice as individual actors. Think about them as part of an organism. That organism was fundamentally divorced from reality. Based on the parameters of this experiment, they went psychotic. If you're not synced up with reality, if you're not actually performing within, and cognizant of reality and what's happening in the world around you, you lose your fucking mind. And everything starts off all hunky-dory. Everything seems cool in the beginning. Right? And then the breakdown happens. Now, there are so many different things I want to touch on this. I actually might double back to this after I've had a little bit more time to sort of dwell on it and get my language models together, because again, I'm reading principles in real time and there's so much to unpack here. But basically, you're seeing what happens to all corrupt life forms, not just humanity. What is society? Society is a system that runs on ideals. It runs on idealism. Money is based in money is an ideal. Authority is an ideal. Ownership is an ideal. These are all derivative of the very same concept, and that is authority, the power to determine meanings, order, and the outcome of events. Those mice, they did not have things that we have in society, like they didn't have social media. They didn't have any form of media, so far as I'm aware. Certainly they didn't create media. They didn't have mass media. So there was nothing to sort of influence the collective of mice from like at I'd say at the scale of the society they were living within and or formed. But yeah, man, their shit broke down because you can't be divorced from reality without going crazy. And again, society is divorced from reality. Authority, there's no such thing as authority in reality. That's an ideal. It's an ideal. And the more you sort of spend time lost in stories and lost in systems of agreements that you either come up with and apply to yourself or achieve with and or between other people, is the more divorced from reality you become. And the shit continues to break down. I was thinking about how this applies to, Black America. Here we have this culture that just, basically was cooked up in a boardroom, probably by people who studied these experiments. And what did they do? They were like, oh shit, hey, let's break down the family bond. Let's put them in competition. Let's make resources scarce among them. And more importantly, not make resources. Let's make resources that we dispense to them easy access. Let's let them feed from the state. Let's create this imbalance of power. And it was social engineering, and what happened in this experiment are not the same, but you can see where social engineering, especially as targeted towards the Black community, you can see where it derived ideas from. You're like, oh shit, wow. And these experiments were conducted back he was working all the way through the 40s, all the way up into the late 60s, early 70s. So you can see where a lot of these ideas sort of source back to. But yeah, I'm a strong Black woman. Yeah, the social engineering. Somebody did that based on trying to make you follow a pathology that they learned about by studying societies of mice. It's disgusting what these people do. And here's the funny part about it. These beautiful mice. These beautiful mice, they are the global elite. The ones that refer to themselves as the global elite. And ironically, them being secluded, this whole thing, it just becomes this. Oh God, how do I describe that? This is the problem with seeing everything in principles. It's like, how do I say this in English? What you're looking at is the same frame that I'm constantly referring to. Bodies inside of bodies, principles inside of principles. It's an echo effect. So if you live in like the upper echelons of society, and we're talking about the higher tiers of the social stratification system in terms of wealth and power, then you are essentially one of the beautiful mice. And if you're one of the beautiful mice, then this experiment necessarily applies to you. You are shielded from reality by the social bubble you live in. You are addicted to self-idealizing, self-care, living and benefiting at the expense of others. Even if the rumors are true, you all have waged war against the human population, what happened in this colony of mice in Universe 25 necessarily spells your fate. Without humanity to fight against towards giving you a sense of purpose and or allowing you to define yourself against something, it's a matter of time before you self-terminate within a very short period of time. And the worst part about that is then you got to deal with reality for being full of corruption and hosting corruption. When you are divorced from reality, you become a host for corruption. When you become a host for corruption, what happened in this experiment is what happens to you. When everybody dials into the inner story, they lose the ability to hear reality. You go fucking crazy. And again, this Universe 25 scenario, it's different from what's happening in the societal arena right now. Because in society, there are external forces pulling strings, manipulating outcomes. Yes, society is tribal, but not even the people who are in the global elite positions are the ones who are necessarily pulling all the strings. Like there's extraterrestrial influence here. Authority. Steering the ship. Making stuff happen. Authority is making stuff happen, then you're not going to get this exact same result. Problem is, methinks, I'm willing to wager, that someone is making moves on behalf of the human population based on what was gleaned from these experiments without understanding the experiments. What you have to understand is through these experiments, because humans do not speak the language that mice in this colony do, only thing they can do is project meanings they come up with onto the behaviors they witnessed. Right now I'm speaking at a principle level, so I'm not necessarily doing the same thing. For this simple reason, they performed this experiment countless times and it came out the exact same way, but it's in theme with everything that I've been explaining about corruption to this point. Prior to coming across this information about this mice colony. When you are divorced from reality, you go psychotic. First at the individual level, then at the social level. Or vice versa. First at the social level and then at the individual level. Either or. You lose your fucking mind. You lose it. It's gone. Done. Universe 25. It's really interesting because, there's so much to unpack with this. But, again, a lot of the correlations that were made in the meme that I saw, they do not fit with what was or what should be actually understood from the experiment itself. This is the danger of being an ideologue. When ideologues, and I was talking about this in an earlier post today. Ideologues only want to fucking be right. So confirmation bias, fucking logical fallacies, poor correlations between objects, subjects, and topics in conversations. Like they don't understand anything beyond how do I win? How do I win? So they took the what was actually explained in this experiment and flipped it so that they could use what was said to justify trying to dominate other humans towards living and benefiting at their expense like parasites. Again, in nature, there would never be a such thing as a Universe 25. Everything serves a purpose, is part of a function, is part of a cycle. Every life form that you see performing in a context, like every bear, that's part of that's part of the forest body. Squirrel, the insects, they're all part of the habitat's body. Nothing can be isolated, nothing can be isolated from a natural habitat and survive. Again, it's very much like cutting off the tip of your finger and putting it in something small and expecting it to preserve or flourish or grow into a new you. It's not gonna. These people cut off these mice from reality and they went fucking crazy. They went insane. Yeah, I don't know if anybody's out there tonight. How you doing? Are you all right? But I might be butchering this podcast. Sometimes I watch podcasts that I do, and it's like the days that I think that it's like I'm killing it, I'm like, oh man, I go back and I watch it, and I'm like, oh man, that was terrible. And other days when I'm completely out of it. Like I was talking about one day when I got back from doing a job, and I was literally like I was seeing. I could see what was around me, but it was like I was looking at blankness. I was done. I was completely checked out. And I went back and I looked at the podcast and I'm like, son of a bitch, I did that? I was completely out of it. How did that happen? But yeah. Universe 25. Again, I'm going to post the link to this. I want you to check it out. It's wild. But, again, the reason why I keep circling back to this is because corruption is modal. Pardon me. Corruption is modal. So, how do I say this? Corruption, it spreads like a disease. It spreads like a disease. It functions like a disease. It is the source of all disease. And in this experiment, because there was no real parasitic presence living and benefiting at the expense of the mice. I mean, save the researchers who were studying them, but that didn't necessarily directly influence their living circumstance. But I mean, back to the point that I was making, corruption is modal. So what applies to a parasite also applies to something that sort of gets cut away, and, or how would I say that? Again, this is the problem with seeing in principles. You like, I have to come up with language to describe all this shit. Cutting away something and watching it rot away. Watching something rot before it's how would I say that? Damn it. Forgive me. Necrosis. That's the word I'm looking for. So I'm saying that is, yeah, necrosis. That's the word I'm looking for. So something spreading like a disease, or something that's sort of necrotic, that's lost the ability to, that is still connected to a body but sort of disconnected from it at the same time. That is, so these are all different, various forms of corruption. All right, and in this rat experiment, this would have been something akin to necrosis, because it was fundamentally cut off from any natural system and any natural way of being. Okay, it was fundamentally protected from any natural state or way of being. But in parasitism, ironically, that circumstance was created by a parasite, so go figure. But in parasitism, it's more pathological. So any life form that sort of internalizes corruption and becomes a host to corruption, it has to be purged by reality. Again, reality is like a huge body, and corruption is like a threat to that body. So whenever a life form gets corruption down in its principal expression, and or what humans refer to as spirit, reality, in order to clean the corruption away from the potential of the life form, it has to do a deep cleanse, a super purge, and it's one of the most brutal things imaginable. I can't even explain how bad it is. It's worse than hell, way worse than hell, way worse than anything related to pain. It's horrific, which is why I spend so much time trying to explain these concepts to you all. But yeah, man, again, the reason why I'm even mentioning all this is because Universe 25, there's a lot that humans can learn from this experiment, but the main takeaway should be, this is what happens when we're fundamentally divorced from reality. This is what we become corrupt the more we dial into our systems of idealism. The more we create society and build society up around us and sort of delve into these ideals, this is what happens. John Calhoun thought that this was a result of overpopulation, but no, it was a result of being divorced from reality. So the longer these mice and the more generations these mice went being fundamentally divorced from reality, is the worse for where they got. Okay, so and again, it's like I bring this back to the black community. Right now, you live in this world where you are trapped in a culture. You're trapped in a culture that was cooked up in a boardroom. You listen to music that is a weapon against you. You are given foods that are weapons against you. You are given values that are weapons against you. And the more you dive deeper and deeper into this culture, is the more you become divorced from reality. And this is by design. This is social engineering. This isn't something that happened when, you naturally segregated yourself from reality. This is a result of someone segregating you from reality and creating a mental prison that you walk around in at all times. At all times. This is why I reject it. Yeah. See, the thing is, it applies to all cultures, though. It applies to all cultures. The deeper and deeper you dive into your culture, is the more divorced you become from reality. The more divorced from reality you become, is the more psychotic you become. Look at racists. The deeper they dive into their mythos, the deeper they dive into their status beliefs and their senses of entitlement and narcissism and their aggressive and competitive spirits, what does it do? It makes them more and more psychotic. It makes them more and more psychotic and angry and aggressive and volatile. So yeah, I think somebody's Facebook just got hacked because someone just sent me one of those inboxes. Why are you in this video? And I'm pretty sure it's to a malware link. It's wild, guys. Again, I strongly encourage you to watch this video. And y'all have to forgive me as I scramble to find language models to apply to all of this, because this is huge. It basically tells you what would have happened if Adam and Eve were left to their own devices. There were the colony started off with 4 mice. 2 males and 2 females. They grew to a population of like 600. And these were select mice. They were engineered. They were engineered for, I guess, the purpose of this experiment. So I'm guessing that, you know, it wasn't just an issue of you know, the genes being too close together. I don't know if that applies to mice the same way it applies to humans. But yeah, it's exactly what would have happened in Adam and Eve. So if Adam and Eve could have remained in the garden and there was no sort of God figure there for them to look to for authority, then it was only a matter of time before they would run into this exact same situation. If the people who are at the top of society right now wage war on the population, are successful in sort of taking out the majority of the population and preserving themselves in the process, this is still going to happen. And the worst part about it is, they've already, the ones who are making all these moves, they're already secluded from society, so they're already operating from a state of deep psychosis. Making moves on behalf of the planet from a mind state that's fundamentally no different than a person who is highly addicted to a substance and in the volatile phase where they no longer have control over themselves. They are driven by impulse at this point. It all traces back to corruption. What happens when corruption moves into and overtakes the mind and the heart and the soul? I might have butchered this podcast, but I'm gonna circle back to it because it's so. I mean, like, God, this experiment back in the 70s, they literally proved everything that I've been explaining for the last decade. They explained everything that I've been talking about for the last decade. It's wild. It's wild. Getting inboxes now. Wild. So yeah, it's crazy. It's insane. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up, guys, because I mean, I don't know what more can be said on this. I'm sure I'm gonna think of several more things to talk about, but so just consider this part 1. But Universe 25 it basically validates everything that I've been saying to this point. If you're fundamentally divorced from reality, and in this little mice sort of utopia, they got, I mean, shit, they were hyper competitive, they were narcissistic, they were aggressive, and they were cowardly. With everything within their grasp, no desire, no need for no need to search for food, no need to avoid predators. A perfect utopia, and they went fucking insane. You know why? Because in reality, that's not how anything works. Nothing is always happy. Happiness comes from balance, not the pursuit of happiness. Happiness and a state of happiness, it comes from purpose, not pursuing happiness. Pleasure comes from balance and connection, not from simply pursuing pleasure. It's like a relationship. A relationship isn't just sex. Sex is part of what comes along with the relationship. You have to do all the supplemental work in order to make sure that everything is in order so that the sex is good. If all you have is pleasure, if all you have is ease, if all you have is escape, you deteriorate, you die, you become corrupt. This is not my personal theory or opinion. There's so much scientific data to back it. So much scientific data to back it. You lay around and you eat all day and you just comfort yourself all the time. What happens? Your body atrophies, it gets soft, and then all of a sudden it breaks down. You lost in the mirror the idea of you, and only thing you do is want to comfort yourself and self-worship. Then you lose the ability to form effective relationships, and you lose the ability to communicate and connect with others. Like, ideals get you in trouble, man. They divorce you from reality, and the more they divorce you from reality is the more corrupt you become, and the more corrupt you become is the more reality is going to have to do to get the corruption out of you. Brutally. Anywho, let me go ahead and wrap this up. Yo, I don't know if anybody tried to comment tonight. I know Facebook was having some issues earlier today. So yeah, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Oh man, I'm looking rough today. I was walking to the store, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I was like, man, I look terrible. But let me see. Here we go. Y'all already know what it is. It's your man Donald King. This is Sorting and Sourcing Principles. Show when I give you is a show in which I give you the breakdown of how things work in reality, based on how I'm able to see through a type of perspective that was imbued to me by the system itself. Reality is synonymous with the phenomenon humans refer to as God. Reality is a living, sentient, and self-aware system which manages balance between systems and interdependent systems we commonly refer to as organisms and or life forms. I'm here to give you the mapping system of how reality works, because y'all have been living in idealism, and you have a lot of really great ideas. But those ideas are not reality. They are still your ideas. The species. Funny part about it is, the more you guys try to make sense of the world and navigate by means of your agreements and ideals and beliefs and whatnot, is the bigger the messes you make in reality, and the more you're going to have to pay for the messes you make on the back end. That is why I am here to help explain to you what I see through a perspective that's been afforded to me by the system itself, so that you get some awareness for how reality works from outside the little bubble you live in. It's what it is. Guys, y'all already know what it is. I shoot these podcasts every Monday and Wednesday on Facebook Live. Times vary. I'm not sure when. Some days I just get it done when I can. I am also on Instagram. I shoot little videos to Instagram. Little snippets here and there, just in case y'all can't catch the full podcasts and whatnot. I also fly these videos over to YouTube, and I really got to catch up on these because I think I'm almost 20 videos in the hole that I need to upload to my YouTube channel. I'm bad about that. I've been super busy, but that's not an excuse. I still need to get it done. Also, I post content to Medium, stories, parables, things to get you guys, understanding these principles as best I can. I'm trying to give you all the tools in my chest. Hopefully you put them to some good use. If you get any sort of appreciation out of what I do and you want to bless your boy with a little bit of love, you can always, Salt Bay your boy with a little bit of love through Cash App. I'm at Donniekang. That's DONNIEKANG. And then also on Patreon, Avatar Cycle XIII. That's Avatar Cycle 13. Proceeds go to building this up to a larger platform and helping me get organized on this side. I'm doing everything that I can to try and get as many principles as I can sort of mapped out for you guys before I'm out of this body. And we'll just see how it goes, man. We'll see how it goes. But it doesn't make sense for me to tell you all that I have this momentous task on my shoulders and not at least give you an opportunity to help. After all, you are the ones who need to benefit from this. This is information you need, not could benefit from this. You need this. Like, you're entering into a state and condition where there's a lot of shit you got to know and a lot of things that you got to try and clean up on this side before you head over there. And if I were y'all, I would get to work doing it ASAP. Look here. What Universe 25 ultimately demonstrates is that when you get a group that only interacts with itself and only reflects itself back to itself, even though there is a group, it's kind of like being isolated, alone in a cell. You know how your mind breaks down when you are alone, when you go crazy, when you remain isolated for an extended period of time? So what happened to these mice, and it's what happens in cultures. A lot of you are psychotic as a result of the cultures you've sort of been raised around and voluntarily immersed yourselves within. You're psychotic. And as such, you're doing things to assist corruption that make you enemies to reality. Nothing in reality that is unbalanced remains unbalanced. And anything that causes or contributes to imbalance, why, the potential, the energy that has to get used to restore balance comes off your scorecard. Your meaning things that cause and create imbalance, which necessarily entails every corrupt entity, agent, and life form. None of this is free. Yeah, I'm definitely have to watch this back, though I feel like I kind of dropped the ball a little. Yeah, But we'll see. Guys, it's your man, Don. I'm out.